So good morning, everyone. Welcome to week 6 of our summer series that we are calling Unstuck. And over the last 5 weeks, we've been talking about areas in our lives that we just seem to get stuck and can't get past. Whether that's in our relationship with God, whether that's in our relationship with others. But there are times where we get so stuck it feels like we can't get past it. And whether that's been wrong focus or anger or hurt that came from the local church, we talked about extreme loss or tragedy, or even when things look to be so bad going on in the world that we just don't know whether it's worth it to get out of bed in the morning. We can get stuck in such a holding pattern that it feels like there's just no way to break free. It's easy to get stuck. I don't know about you, but there have been times in my life where it just feels like you can't get over that hill, right? There are times where we just can't figure out what the next step is. And this morning, I'm going to talk about something that many of us have probably struggled with over the years, and it's the thing that keeps us back from hearing more and more from Jesus. And it's something that we can't just get over super easily because it's deeply, deeply ingrained in who we are. But it can get us stuck in every aspect of our lives, okay? For me, it is easy to get stuck in my relationship with God when I look in the mirror and I don't like what's staring back at me. Now, I'm not talking just about like waking up in the morning and looking in the mirror and going, man, I really wish I could lose 15 pounds. Because realistically, it's about 50, but there we go. Or we sometimes look in the mirror and say, man, if I just had this right job, I will have arrived. And I'm not talking about those type of things deeply ingrained in us, even though some of those things come out of what we are going to be talking about this morning. No, I'm talking about like when we look in the mirror and all we can see is every flaw, every hurt, every failure, every mistreatment, and they seem to be screaming back at us louder than God's truth and what He has to say about us. I get stuck when I believe the lie that God screwed up when He created me. I get stuck in the lie that when I believe that I am broken beyond repair. So here's the thing we need to talk about this morning. I think as human beings, we have an identity problem. I think most of the time we have no idea who we are or who we're supposed to be. And I think as we struggle with that, we struggle to figure out who we're supposed to marry, what we're supposed to do, what hobbies we're supposed to be a part of. And sometimes those things are more overbearing and they just weigh us down. If you think I'm wrong on that, we just need to look at some of the issues going on in the world as far as when we look at identity, okay? People struggle with their sex, their gender, who they choose to love. We struggle with same-sex marriage. People struggle with their career, their financial statement, their weight, their hobbies, and their relationships. Okay, people struggle with addiction, others struggle with their mental health, and some just struggle to get out of bed in the morning because we don't know what the next step looks like. I think the biggest struggle that comes from all of this, though, and it's the one that takes me down every time, is I think that we struggle with what our inner monologue has said to us so many times over the years. Chris and I were talking about it back in the back. We were talking about it a little bit this morning, that sometimes we're talking about the idea of praying for our enemies. And I don't know about you, my enemy isn't the person who's out there or anything like that, but sometimes my worst enemy is me. And my worst enemy just tears me down. I think we believe the lies because we've heard them so many times that they become perceived truths. And to give a picture of that, we went down to the Orange Conference down in April, the pastoral staff went down, and we heard a guy named John Acuff speak. Okay, he's a best-selling author, he's a speaker that goes around, and he described the struggle, okay, as having a broken soundtrack or a bad playlist that keeps repeating over and over and over and over in our minds. We think sometimes that, like, towards the end of the life or in life and death situations, that we see a movie of our life playing, right before our eyes. But in all actuality, as the day and day goes by, it's like a soundtrack that's constantly in the background telling us things that are complete lies. It's constantly playing, whether we noticeably hear it or not. Okay, think about that playlist on Spotify or Apple Music or Amazon that you have carefully crafted. Like, it is absolutely perfect now. It is like the best playlist you have ever put together. I have one on my phone that I call Tyler's Awesome Playlist. And it's funny because a lot of those songs are from like the late 90s and early 2000s that like emo was just kind of starting up. So I don't actually know how awesome it actually is. But if you're older, maybe it was a mixtape. Do you guys remember creating those? That girl that you loved, you just had to show her, that I keep on loving you. Like you just needed to give her that mixtape. Or maybe it was one of those compilation CDs, like now that's what I call Country Volume 47. You guys remember those? So most of the time we add songs to our playlist because of the way that they make us feel. Okay, maybe it's a road trip playlist. Maybe it's every single time that you get in a car and you're going to drive 4 or 5 hours that you're putting on Save a Horse, Ride a Cowboy. I don't know. Weirdly enough, that was kind of my road trip mix in college, so I don't know why. But maybe it's that worship playlist that you listen to every single time that you go and spend time with Jesus. But here's the thing. Most of us probably don't put on music very often that makes us feel sad or melancholy. Like, nobody wants to put on that emo music the second they get in the car to go on vacation. Like, that sets the tone for the vacation, right? Here's the thing, though, is I'm sure we associate songs and genres with bad past memories. The band Snow Patrol, for me, is a soundtrack that when I hear it, it reminds me of rejection, of 13-hour-long depression naps, and me staring at the ceiling for a really long time, wondering what I need to change myself to be loved. Okay, and Acuff puts it like this: your thoughts are your internal soundtrack you listen to more than your favorite song. Over the years, you have built a soundtrack about your career. You have built a soundtrack for all your relationships. You have a soundtrack, you believe, about all your hopes, dreams, goals, and every other aspect of your life. If you listen to any thought long enough, it becomes part of your personal playlist. Think about that. If you've heard the phrase, "I'm worthless," so many times, it's ingrained in you and it becomes permanent truth. If you hear, "I'm never going to get along with somebody," or "I'm never going to fit in," it becomes personal truth. It gets added to your inner soundtrack that is broken. But anyone feel like that? Like, is there anything that is stuck in your minds or a truth that you believe for a really long time that you know is not healthy? Or you know that has been sitting with you forever and you can't even remember who told you that to begin with? Right? A lot of that's my story. Over the years, I believe things that if someone were to write it on a piece of paper and hand it to me and I were to read it, I would be furious or incredibly sad, or I'd go into depression. But for whatever reason, it's okay when I say it to myself. I can't be the only one in the room like that, right? But for whatever reason, it's okay when I say it to myself. Here's some of the ones that I've believed over the years, okay? I'm fat, so that means people will never like me or accept me for who I am. That was a deep one. How about this one? I've failed at things in my past, so obviously that means I'm a failure in everything. How about this one? If I screw up, people will abandon me and I will be alone. These were and sometimes still are part of my broken playlist. Now, the New York Times a while ago did a study called The Songs That Bind, okay, in which they're trying to figure out, like, when is the most likely that a person will add a song to their playlist. Okay, Seth Steven Davidowitz. That's just a hard, I can't say that 3 times fast. An economist, and he's like assisting with the story, okay? And this is all being commissioned by Spotify for the New York Times, okay? They're trying to figure out what it is. And they found that the most important period for men forming their adult taste was between the ages of 13 and 16. And that for women, it's between the ages of 11 and 14, okay? So that means that if it's an impressionable enough song, an 11-year-old girl today will still be listening to it when she's 90. Think about that, okay? Think about how much more, though, ingrained negative thought patterns and lies become a part of us. Okay, things I experienced from friends, from bullies, from teachers. I've had a couple of doozies on that one. Acquaintances from the period of 13 to 17 or 18 have stuck with me and has shaped a lot of my life and my false beliefs that I have about myself. It's right in that area, and I think that if many of us were to look back at our formative years, a lot of what we have ingrained in us, whether it's positive or whether it's negative, came from that time period. Identity is so hard because it's something that we struggle to be secure with. Our identity from one day to the next could be different, and we struggle with that because it seems like nothing's the same. Okay, we get into an identity that we've assigned ourselves or someone else has assigned to us, and just when we feel comfortable in it, something changes. Okay, I believe that the only identity that we can truly be secure in, though, is the one that God has given us. And without seeing that and without living that, we are grasping onto false hopes and shaping our lives around things that just could change on a moment's notice. I think the biggest mindset that we struggle to understand is seeing ourselves as God's most important creation. It's hard to grasp, especially if we can't see any worth inside of ourselves. Okay, to begin to see why this is, we need to go to the book of Genesis. We're going to chapter 1. Okay, we are going back to creation. Matt Daniels spoke a little bit about it last week, the head of our elder board. I'm going to take us back even farther, okay? Chapter 1, verse 1 says, I'm getting a lot of amens. That's awesome. So, chapter 1, verse 1 says, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Now, over 5.5 days, God creates good things. Okay, from nothingness, he makes things that in his viewpoint are necessary and they are good. Day 1, he creates the heaven and the earth, and he creates day and night. Good. Day 2, he makes a distinction between the earth and the heavens, and he calls it sky, and it's good. Okay, day 3, he makes the water and the land separate. He makes all type of plant life, fruit trees, everything that is supposed to be provided for nourishment for his future creation, and it's good. Day 4 is the sun and the moon so that the light and darkness can take care of itself. He also creates and places stars, and no matter how beautiful they look, they're still just good. Day 5, he creates birds and sea life, which is good. I might say it's a little bit better than good because he created otters, and they're super awesome. So, day 6, part 1. He creates all other animals, okay? Here's a lion, boom, there's a cow. Maybe he said to himself, I need a good laugh right now, so I'm going to make the duck-billed platypus. Mammal with a duck bill. Makes no sense whatsoever, but it's beautiful to God. It is good. These things are all good. But here's where the ultimate difference comes in. Okay, day 6, part 2. Genesis 1:26 says this, then God said, let us make mankind in our image, in our likeness, so that they may rule over the fish in the sea, over all the livestock and all wild animals, and over all creatures that move along the ground. This is where God, Father, Son, and Spirit, does something that he has not done in all the rest of creation. Okay, he makes man in his image, in his likeness, he calls it. He takes man and forms him and breathes himself into his final creation. Okay, as a result, man is then designed to be eternal or living forever. Okay, there's no other thing in creation that will live on after death. Okay, man is the only thing in creation to bear the likeness of God. The Latin for this is the imago Dei. Okay, imago meaning image, Dei meaning God. And everything else is good in creation, but until mankind is created, it just stays good. Okay, it's at the end of day 6. Once man is created, God says that his creation has become very good. And then he rests. There's nothing else to create. He has created the pinnacle. Okay, you and I are that pinnacle of God's creation, and as a result, we bear something amazing that we fail to recognize very often. Okay, when we talk about being made in the image of God, Tim was talking about it as he was dedicating the babies. It doesn't mean that we are looking like God in a physical sense. Okay, it's not like I have a lot of my mom's side of the family genes. Like I am Waterbury through and through. That's how it is. Sometime look at pictures of my cousins on Facebook. Same cut, same cloth. Okay? It instead means that we are wired with all of the best parts of God. Okay, we got his creativity, we got his capacity to love, we got his leadership, we received his compassion, we received his capacity to choose. And think about that for a second. We received his capacity to choose. It's called free will. And we really don't think very often of God having the capacity for choice. Like it's not something that we think about or bring up very often when we think about his character. Okay? He's not a robot God who created and then set himself on autopilot, like only to come awake when punishment or discipline needs to happen. But here's the thing. He's been known to change his plans when his people have faith and when they talk to him. Where we begin to get stuck with identity completely has to do with the fall, though. We see the creation there, and Matt shared with us last week that when the fruit in the garden was eaten, that sin entered into the world. Okay, and Matt told us one of the consequences of that was banishment from the perfection of the garden, and thus having to navigate life kind of seemingly on our own. But there's another consequence that came along with this, okay? Sin distorted our perception of the imago Dei in how we view ourselves and how we view others. Think about that. If you are looking poorly at someone, it is because of sin. If you are looking poorly at yourself, it is because we fail to recognize how good God created us. Okay, we no longer see the wonders of how we are created in that image of God. That original sin that begun in the chain reaction from Adam and Eve, knowing who they are and knowing that their purpose, being unrestricted and unhindered in the presence of God, now becomes feeling alone, not knowing or living out the purpose, feeling separated from God, or filled with shame over their actions. And humanity has struggled with that ever since. The imago Dei becomes less and less recognizable, and the image of self becomes everything. Now, the image of self is the mindset that screws us up, okay? Because the image of self says we're listening to what's inside of us and not what God is trying to tell us. It says I need to take care of me before everything else, no matter who gets hurt. It's the thing that spews forth our comparison with others. The image of self screws us up. It's kind of a weird segue, but has anyone ever seen the show Nailed It on Netflix? Yeah, only a couple? Okay, then I need to explain it to everyone else. Okay, for those of you that don't know, Nailed It is a baking show on Netflix. Okay, it's hilarious. Okay, they give people the opportunity to recreate a professional dessert, usually like a cake. Okay, and then they are judged on how well they do. It's a competition, right? But it usually doesn't come out that way as they've hoped, even though they think it has. Okay, in fact, look at some of these, because, yeah. Nailed it. I kind of see why the dinosaurs went extinct on this one. I'm just saying. Nailed it. Is it just me, or is the unicorn on the right, its eyes just like burning into your souls right now? So these are crazy. You guys need to go watch the show at least once because yeah. But hear me out. I think that we can figure out a little lesson about the image of God from this. Okay, over the course, I have felt like the cake. Kind of funny. You probably wouldn't have expected to come in this morning and hear Tyler comparing himself to a cake. If you did, you know me better than I do. But as I said, I get stuck sometimes when I can't see that God knew what he was doing when he created me. Okay, you like me probably saw those cakes, as I heard from laughter, and you're like, wow, those are absolutely terrible, okay? But what would happen if the judges were to look at those cakes and that all they see is the original model that was used and not what was presented? For each cake, okay? It seems too good to be true, right? Everyone would win $10,000. And we like competition shows, but competition shows are only there if someone loses, right? We like to see someone win in here. But here's the thing. This is the way that God sees us. God sees us as the perfect cake. Despite how we see ourselves, despite what our efforts are, despite what we have presented back to him, he still sees the perfection and the image of God in all of us. Okay, the Imago Dei doesn't diminish in the eyes of God. Whether you are choosing to follow God or not, the Imago Dei is present in all human beings. He still sees the image of himself in his people, and loves his creation despite our self-inflicted flaws and our negative belief towards ourselves, okay? He didn't create mistakes when he made you and I. None whatsoever. Okay, in fact, there's a portion in Scripture that I want to look at real quick, and it takes place in 2 books of the Gospels. Okay, Gospels meaning good news, where Jesus is talking to his 12 closest friends. We call them the apostles, or we call them the 12 disciples. And disciples were students and followers of his that wanted to be more like them, more like Jesus that day than they were the day before. And then they wanted to be more like Jesus the day after that than they were the day before. Okay, it's what we are striving here at Connection Point to be, as hopefully you have heard the term now, everyday disciple. Okay, we want to be more like Jesus today than we were yesterday. And tomorrow we want to be more like Jesus than we were today. So in the Gospels of Matthew and Luke, Jesus is sending out the 12, okay? They're going into surrounding communities, and they're going to go drive out demons, they're going to heal people, and they are going to proclaim that the kingdom is near. But he warns them that when they go out, they are going to have some hard times, including some betrayal, some persecution. But he says this, Matthew 10, 29 and 31, "Are not 2 sparrows sold for a penny? Yet not one of them will fall to the ground outside your Father's care. And even the very hairs on your head are numbered. So don't be afraid, you were worth more than many sparrows." It amazes me that Jesus is saying that God the Father knows us so well that he knows every single hair on your body. Okay, in a commentary from a few early church leaders, a guy named Hilary, who was a 3rd century bishop, observed this about the subject. He says, "For when anything is numbered, it is carefully watched over." And it was great that we put the marbles into perspective like that this morning. When anything is numbered, they are carefully watched over. Jerome, who's another early church leader and a church historian, wrote that he, being God, that he says the hairs of your head are all numbered, shows the boundless providence of God towards man and a care unspeakable that nothing of ours is hid from God. It means that God keeps knowing our inner workings so deeply that mistakes were not even the realm of possibility when He created you and I. God couldn't screw up when making you and I. Now, He didn't create mistakes, but He does acknowledge that there is a blockage between both our ability to see ourselves as He does and the ability to go back to what was established, that relationship between Adam and Eve at the beginning. Okay, and as a result, sin was there. As a result of that sin, there wasn't just a change in the perception of God, but there's also a spiritual death that now came into the world. It wasn't just a disconnect with God here on earth, but there's also a disconnect with God for eternity. And because of that, something needed to happen. Okay, something needed to be taken care of because we can't fix sin on our own. No matter what cake we present to God, we cannot fix sin on our own. Okay, so He sends Jesus to earth, 100% man, 100% God, to live a perfect life, to die a vicious, terrible death, raised from the grave, also that relationship in the garden could be reestablished. When that happens, death no longer means anything. One thing that is fantastic about this is we can start to begin to see ourselves, though, as God sees us. 2 Corinthians 5:17 says that if anyone is in Christ, a new creation has come. The old has gone and the new is here. I don't know about you, but when I started my relationship with Jesus, I didn't think of myself as such a new creation. Right? We hear if you accept Jesus, your problems will go away and it's going to be the best relationship you've ever had. It's true, but it's a little bit longer than that. Snap, here it is. So I thought of myself as someone whose sins were forgiven, but I didn't really think that much of me had changed other than that. I wish someone had told me that when a new creation is made in Jesus, that He doesn't see the old anymore. It's right there in that verse, but I had never heard it. I wish somebody had told me that Jesus doesn't hold on to things, waiting to use them against me in the future. Even though many of us have heard Ephesians 2:10 before, I don't think we really take in how amazing it is. I don't think in the past it has changed our soundtracks like it should have. But this morning, I'm hoping it's going to breach just a little bit in that, okay? It says, "For we are God's handiwork, created in Christ Jesus to do good works, which God prepared in advance for you to do." Another version says, "We are God's masterpiece." This is all pre-fall garden language right here. Okay, this is type of stuff that God would tell Adam and Eve before that fruit was eaten. Okay? It is helping us see that like Adam and Eve before us, have value and purpose and worth. I don't know who needs to hear this morning, but I think it's probably everybody in this room. But you are valuable. You are loved. You've been made in the image of God, and you are the pinnacle of His creation. With that said, how do we stop being stuck, or at least begin to stop being stuck? When we struggle with our identity, or how do we begin to reshape the soundtracks in our lives if our beliefs have been this way for the longest time? I think the first thing that starts us there, and it should go without saying, but we're saying it anyway, you need to start a relationship with Jesus if you haven't. We can't begin to see the goodness of what He wants to say unless we begin to know who He is and what He wants from us. 2, if you have already started a relationship with Him, make sure that you're talking to Him daily. If you say you know who He is, but you are not talking to Him and you are not hearing from Him, you are guessing at best what He wants for your life. And you're not taking in the fullness of His truth. Number 3, remind yourself however you can that you are God's masterpiece. This almost feels self-helpish, but trust me, we need to hear these things sometimes. Okay, John Acuff says it this way, that if we want to stop hearing our broken or negative soundtracks, that we need to start replacing them with ones that tell us the truth and ones that are kind to us. So we need to start with surrounding ourselves by God's truth. There are several ways that can happen. I'm just pointing out a couple of them to get you started. But all of you in your weekly planner should have gotten what is basically a 3x5 card. Go ahead and pull that out. So this 3x5 card says, "For I am God's masterpiece, created in Christ Jesus to do good works, which God prepared in advance for me to do." And I added down below, "All because He loves me, made me in His image, and didn't make a mistake when creating me to be me." Now, the purpose of this, I want you to carry this around in your pocket. This isn't a leave it in the planner scenario. I want you to carry this around in your pocket, and I want you to look at it several times a day. Because we need to keep hearing things like this over and over and over and over again. If you need to set an alarm on your phone to go off, just so that you can pull it out and get a little bit of God's truth to remind you of who you are and who God made you to be, then do it. Because we need to replace those soundtracks. Okay, write verses on mirrors or places that you look often. Right? Every time you go into the bathroom or take a shower, you're going to get a glimpse of God's truth. Read Scripture and spend time journaling your thoughts on it. Get it out of your mind and get it onto paper. And leave it on there. It's not always the easiest, and sometimes it comes back again, and you have to write the same thing over and over and over and over again. But it's a step. And finally, take time to listen to some worship music without anyone else around. Okay, not just in the background while you're doing other work, because then that gets lost. But put on some headphones, go sit in your closet if you need to, and just breathe. Just breathe. Every person can have something different that brings them back to Jesus or refocuses them on God's truth. Those are just a couple that have worked for me over the years. You all may have your own, but do them. Number 2, keep a council of encouragers. You need people in your corner to continually remind you of who God has made you to be. Okay, sometimes even that means you need someone to give you a swift kick in the butt in a holy way. Because I don't know about you, but sometimes I can get stuck in a spiral that I need help getting out of. Now, I think of a council, and when I think of that council, I'm nerdy, so this is what happens. I think of the beginning of the Lord of the Rings, okay, Fellowship of the Ring. Okay, and all of these people are coming together. There's some elves and a dwarf and humans and hobbits, and they're coming together because there's this one thing, this bit of evil that is plaguing them. And there are unlikely people getting together and going on this journey together to get through that. You may not know who the right people are, so it means you may need to be open to people that you're not expecting to be open to. One of the best places that got past a lot of my negative soundtracks over the year was in a life group. I was in an amazing one. And I'm going to encourage you this morning that if you have not thought about a life group, if you have not thought about a discipleship group, come talk to Pastor Mark this morning. Because we can't just journey on our own and expect things to be fixed. But not only that, when you go and sign up for a life group and get into one and talk to Pastor Mark about what they do, pledge to yourself to be open. It may hurt a little while you're in there, but when you are on the other side, the journey is complete. Finally, this is on me because this is a new one for me too. but don't be afraid to seek professional help. Okay, we don't talk very often about mental health and how that there's sometimes that we just cannot mentally, spiritually, and emotionally process through on our own. And sometimes that means we need to journey with somebody through some professional counseling. Or other times it can mean that our brain chemistry is a little bit off and we need some medication to help with that. Just like having a bone set, our brain is an organ that needs to be healed just as much. I've been on antidepressants for the last 7 years, and they balance me out. I have no shame in saying that because it's like taking a medication for any other thing that I would need to take. Okay? But here's the thing. Some of that medication sometimes can open us up to hearing what God's true soundtracks are actually about. When I worked at the rescue mission, there was our head pastor who was there used to say that even if the medication came in and you could get a clarity of an hour of hearing what Jesus actually had to say about you, you might have the freedom and the ability to choose to go towards him. Maybe a little bit of a brain chemistry thing has gotten you off on just trying to figure out who this guy Jesus is. And you need to go through with that. I'm also in the process of starting up some professional counseling, okay? Because I know that I have some hang-ups about myself that I don't know how to process on my own. Okay, weirdly enough, I'm looking forward to that, even though I know that it's probably going to hurt quite a bit when I go through it. But on the other side, I'm going to be a little bit more who Jesus wants me to be, because I can understand his truth a little bit better. And so I'm going to invite the band back up this morning. I'll say this about identity, that when we figure out who we are in Jesus, things start to become a little bit clearer. It doesn't mean that we are going to have that identity that we recognize every single day, but it is going to help us put things back on a path that we can understand who he is, how much he loves us, and how much he wants a relationship with us. So maybe this morning you are reaching a little bit of a changing point and saying, I have no idea who this Jesus guy is, but if he can make me a little bit better, or if he can start to put me into a place where I understand who I am, I want to figure out a little bit more about him. If you come up, pastors, elders would love to walk you through introducing you to him. Maybe you just need to come up and you need to have some alone time with Jesus where he tells you how much he loves you because it's been a really long time since you've heard that. Then come on up. Maybe there are things that you know that Jesus has an identity for you, but you don't recognize it or understand who you are, and you just need someone to listen to and pray with you. Come on up and people will be here with you. But here's the thing. Do not leave this place this morning without knowing how much God loves you and how much there was no possible way that he made a mistake when he created you.